Welcome to From the White Pill Box, the podcast where we stomp on statism and find the white pills along the road to a stateless society. I'm your host, Mark Maresca. I'm the author of the Substack articles of the same name, From the White Pill Box, content specifically for the already red-pilled, libertarians, voluntarists, anarchists, people who've overcome the myth of statism or are close to it. It's easy for us to be black-pilled, to believe evil will win. That's where the white pill box comes in. There are real-world reasons to have hope. Let's get going. Greetings, all. Thank you so much for listening today. Today's installment is part 8 of my series of podcasts about the myth of authority. Well, this series has covered a lot of ground. The fundamentals were examined in the first 6 episodes. Then in the last episode, number 7, I began applying those fundamentals to start examining libertarian strategy and how it relates, or does not relate, to the myth of authority. I encourage you to listen to the series to get the full picture up to now. Here's a summary of the strategy-related discussions so far. The myth of authority is the cause of the state, which means it should be the laser focus of libertarian strategy. Also, the myth is a psychological phenomenon. But this has not been leveraged in libertarian strategies. Strategies can be classified as direct or indirect. Direct approaches are direct in 2 ways. First, by connecting directly to the audience's true self. And second, by keeping the myth of authority as the central theme. Indirect strategies, which have predominated, are the opposite. They speak to people's indoctrinated false self, which is generally an uphill battle. Also, they do not address the myth of authority and instead focus strictly on the myth's effect, the state. That makes them indirect since they do not strike at the root. Thus, we have the key reason our traditional strategies have only enjoyed marginal success. Indirect strategies come in various flavors. Politics to score wins, politics to spread messaging, and outside of politics for messaging. But all are indirect so long as they speak only to the indoctrinated mind and do not prioritize the myth of authority. Now, on to today's discussion. Having spent time on the indirect strategies, now it's time to shift over to direct approaches. I thought that a great way to shift over is to examine some real-world messaging examples. I've selected 3. The first illustrates sort of a hybrid, an interview that uses pretty much the indirect style, but has elements of the direct strategy. And even that sprinkling of the direct style produces positive results. The second, another interview, is a lot more in your face. It's pretty close to the direct approach. The success is even more obvious, as well as the potential for ripple effect success, a real white pill. The third example is a YouTube video. This is near letter perfect direct strategy in action. I linked to all of these in the show notes. First, I'll cover the 2 interviews. These were both fairly recent. We had 2 excellent anarchists being interviewed. The interviewers themselves were intelligent and well followed. They were highly receptive, although not anarchists themselves. It's a perfect recipe for planting successful seeds with the direct approach. The first example is an interview done by Jordan Peterson. If you don't know him, we have here a highly intelligent author, teacher, and speaker. You know, we talk about people who are deep thinkers, and this is one of them. He interviewed one of our human white pills, Michael Malice. If you don't know him, get to know him. He's a very interesting figure. He's an author and podcaster. He's a self-declared anarchist and proud of it. He will go head-to-head with the best of them. One of his distinctions as an anarchist is his understanding that a great way to delegitimize the state is to mock and belittle politics and politicians any chance he gets. Also, to mock and belittle the handmaidens of the state, the institutions that spread statist propaganda and the myth of authority, the corporate press and traditional education, for example. Notice right away here, he's attacking the root cause, the myth of authority. How? By mocking them, He's helping people become less likely to see them as legitimate, respectable authority. He's the little boy yelling that the emperor has no clothes. Anyway, both Jordan Peterson and Michael Malice have sharp minds, and this interview went deep into a lot of topics. Now, Jordan has heard anarchy discussed from libertarian perspectives before, but he has one of the challenges of a deep intellect. Using my own metaphor, he'll take a big picture and bust it up into 100 puzzle pieces and microanalyze each piece. Now, philosophically, there's nothing wrong with that. That's how we ground the foundations in our thinking. The problem with it, especially if you're a high-powered intellectual, is that the big picture is perhaps never seen or it gets lost, all from spending too much time in the weeds of the details. If you are shown the big picture, you're impatient with its simplicity. It's not complex enough for your big brain. That's not unique to Jordan, but it comes out in this interview. Now, Michael has a knack for taking what appears to be complex truths and reducing them to simple but effective terms, like the way catchphrases do. And he did this a few times in the interview, and you can see how it was eye-opening to Jordan. A great illustration was when they were discussing the thousands of ways we interact, friendships, workplace, etc. They dove into the details, which involved many, many complexities and tangents. Jordan here was attempting to perceive any sort of truth that ties them together. If you want a time marker, the good point starts at about 1 hour and 40 minutes. Eventually, he got around to asking Michael how all these many kinds of interactions connect back to Michael's understanding of anarchy, why he calls all those human relationships anarchy. Michael says 3 words: because it's voluntary. Maybe 10 minutes of Jordan's complex details encapsulated in 3 words: because it's voluntary. Jordan's reaction is wonderful. He's stunned at the simplicity. His brilliant mind speeds through the ways to process that answer and then understand it's the final answer. All that happens in a second or two, but you can tell that he at least gets it, can't argue it, and doesn't need to argue it. If that's not enough, check out what happens next. He relates to it, to a project of his own that involves the recognition of voluntary arrangements. I want you to appreciate how he heard something that he related strongly to, because one of the markers of progress is when you say things that resonate with others. Okay, then there's Michael's reaction to that. It's priceless, because he playfully, of course, takes it as a win, as if he had gotten Jordan Peterson all the way over to anarchism. They both take it with humor, because obviously he didn't. As you all know, we don't persuade people in one sitting with just a few words. But the cool thing is, that's another quality sorely lacking in this movement: likability. Nerds don't tend to be socially likable. Someone like Michael Malice breaks that mold. Now, continuing on in the conversation, Jordan next brought up this valid concern. Okay, great. So you've got everyone interacting voluntarily and productively. What happens when someone breaks the rules? They don't act in a voluntary way. In other words, they initiate force. Michael handled this very, very well. As you can probably guess, the answer centered on property and what justifies the use of force. He said that private property delineates the rules of behavior. The owner makes the rules for his property. Anyone breaking those rules is initiating aggression, making the owner's response defensive, thereby justified. And so in this exchange as well, there is a simple and elegant answer, and this too resonates with the host. And yet another example, somewhere around 1 hour and 40 minutes, is where Michael brings up eBay, yes, eBay, as an example of non-government methods of adjudicating disputes. It's a real pleasure to watch. Part of the reason I'm mentioning this interview is the joy I got from watching one of our big names being showcased in a long-form discussion with an influential personality. I love thinking about the potential for it. A wide audience, a great chance to spark interest in anarchism and a stateless society, etc. A nice white pill. But it's also illustrative for the purposes of my Myth of Authority series here. Was this interview an example of the direct approach? Definitely, though partly. Remember, the direct approach involves two things: speaking directly to their true self and connecting the topic to the myth of authority. So this interview had that first element of the direct approach, speaking to the true self. And that requires knowing your audience. One-on-one conversations are best for this because you can watch for what resonates with them. The direct approach seeks to partner with them. In this case, Jordan Peterson's natural style is to explore many detailed topics, drill down in each, and hopefully, eventually, put a circle around it all and form a big picture. Moreover, he prizes voluntary arrangements. He prizes justice. For this type of mind, you score points when you can take a lot of detail, elegantly simplify it, and actually produce real-world answers. Well, in this interview, you can watch it in action, done expertly. Now, did he make Jordan into an anarchist? No, but keep in mind, that is not the goal within a given conversation. Instead, it was a great example of speaking to the true self and planting seeds. Goal achieved. I have no doubt Jordan's mind will process this in its own way. Jordan's true self now has to grapple with his false indoctrinated self. That's the part that is still in some fog of statism, I presume. That battle happens in his head, where it should. We don't get to watch that. Now, in this interview, we did not see the other part of the direct approach. It did not insert much about the myth of authority. And to be clear, I'm not complaining or faulting Michael Malice. This really was fun to watch and a win in my mind. But yes, putting solid focus on the myth of authority, interlacing the root of the problem into the discussion would make it fully direct. But here's one of the white pill aspects of Michael Malice. Although the myth of authority was not addressed in this interview, he has done it in others many times by using a common phrase. He's often asked what anarchy means, and he frequently gives this great short answer. He says it can be reduced to one sentence: "You don't speak for me. Everything else is just application." This is beautiful. Notice how much is packed into this. You don't speak for me. Right there, it attacks the myth of authority head on. The myth can't hold up to that answer because everyone would say that and mean it. You don't speak for me. It hits the part of our mind that is a common true self in all of us, the part that expects to and does run our private lives every day. You don't speak for me. And if you were to try to speak for me, we'd have a problem. That's the great psychology of the phrase. It's individualistic and personal. It carries the pride of being an independent adult, not a child. Who speaks for the child? The parents, right? But I'm an adult. You don't speak for me. Awesome. Okay, let's move on to the other interview. This was Jason Whitlock interviewing Larkin Rose. Some background. If you're not familiar with Larkin Rose, get familiar. So far as I know, he's one of the very few anarchists whose central mission is to address the myth of authority and help people get over it. He's got YouTube videos galore, his own website, which I'll link to. He's an author, he's done speaking, debates, and so on. Larkin wrote the screenplay of the feature film Jones Plantation, which was released in 2023. You'll find links to that interview along with the Jones Plantation movie website, plus the Amazon link where you can watch it. The movie takes place in the slave-era South. It's an allegory about the illusion of authority through indoctrination and deceit. The symbolism is unmistakable. You can't miss how the various storylines parallel perfectly with government, statist propaganda, and so on. The term myth of authority is never used, but it's very clear that the belief in authority is the very power that fuels so-called leaders. Okay, this year in 2024, Larkin was interviewed on the podcast Fearless with Jason Whitlock. Jason is a journalist and podcaster. He and his team talk about common sense and are skeptical of groupthink and political elites. The interview was in two parts. First, Jason interviewed Larkin and the movie's director. Later, he and his regular cast had their own panel discussion about the movie. In this case, we had a host who came right out and said he's never voted and that he doesn't believe in political solutions. Also during the interview, Larkin had a chance to connect the movie to today, saying explicitly that most people still fall for politics, just as the slaves in the movie were falling for the game that kept them enslaved, as direct as you could want. Regarding the movie, understand that it conveyed clearly that political authority is a mind game, which of course we call the myth of authority. The movie helps the viewer understand that's what politics is, but the movie did not offer a particular solution. Understandably, it had enough on its plate. Besides, as I've said before, until you get people out of that fog, step A, they will not be ready anyway for step B. So no criticism there. But this leads to an interesting exchange. Since the movie revealed the problem, not a solution, at one point Jason said to Larkin, "I can't figure you guys out politically. Where are you on the political spectrum? How did you grow up politically? What do you think the solution is?" Larkin answered the questions as asked. He said he was raised conservative Republican constitutionalist. His values haven't changed, only he stopped believing government can be a force for freedom or justice. He doesn't believe in political authority at all. There isn't a political solution. He doesn't want any person having power over anybody. We can organize any voluntary way, but there will never be a government that does what I want. The perfect answer, right? But remember, the host is not a nerd like us. He took all that and only seemed to take in the first part, the part about being raised a constitutionalist. We know this because later in the show, the guests are gone and now the host and his regulars discuss the film. And to be clear, every one of them loved it, saw the message, got it clearly, and wanted to share it. Again, you can't complain. Then one of them says to Jason that he made it sound like Larkin's an anarchist. Jason said, no, he's not. He just feels that the way the Constitution was written, that what we have today was inevitable. I want you all to notice the deep indoctrination at work here. Now, Larkin was crystal clear about not wanting any government, but it didn't stick in their minds so far as I could tell. It's too alien an idea. Their fog won't permit it, at least not yet. To the host, Larkin is not an anarchist. But how is this possible? It's because the host can't square on the one side that Larkin said he wants no government, and on the other, that Larkin wants all interactions voluntary. Those two things don't make sense when the host thinks of the word anarchy, which, to him, means chaos and throwing bombs in the street. Larkin doesn't advocate that, so he can't be that. Jason's mind, at least not yet, cannot equate anarchy with simply not having rulers. Instead, watch where the conversation goes. It tangents into how the Constitution is amendable, how an initially good Constitution got bastardized, then about how the European Union is like the US government because we need some sort of overarching governing body. There are lessons here. This sort of thing will happen to us, that our answers can be taken out of context. Let's learn from this. People's indoctrination will still put up barriers, even if they seem receptive and even if we think we are being crystal clear. That's why it's all the more important to partner with their true self. Draw them out. Let them do a lot of the talking. They'll feel they're speaking to an ally comfortably. Along the way and later, by themselves, their mind will process the conversation and start to hash it out as their true self battles their indoctrinated self. Another lesson, make your terms as clear and simple as possible because anything more is too much for a mind not yet ready. So help get it ready by giving them the picture, not just the puzzle pieces. When asked where he stands politically, Larkin gave what was a thorough answer, no doubt, but it was also a chance to provide a straight-up answer with a single word. I'm an anarchist. Maybe throw in voluntarist, if he wanted to help them see that he doesn't mean anarchist in the sense of chaos and mayhem. Sure, answer all the questions, but remember, the more we talk, the more need there is to come back to the root, come back to it enough to reduce the chance for misunderstanding. Of course, I realize there's only so much you can control. I am saying the lesson and general template should be to keep it simple, make it direct. If saying less is clearer, say less. And finally, I want to emphasize that even though I'm using this interview as an illustration, I'm not criticizing it. Larkin did not misstep, and the interviewer, Jason, and even his regulars, none of them are being criticized. I'm trying to illustrate the power of the myth of authority so we can all get better at combating it. In terms of this specific interview, this is a win to the power of 10, a nice gut punch to the myth of authority. The last example is a YouTube video, which I'll also link to. It's called The Philosophy of Liberty. Amazingly, this one goes back years, making it an early example of using a more direct approach. Its most direct aspect is how it engages the viewer. It's only about 8 minutes, the whole thing. There's not a single word spoken in this video. It's purely graphics, basically small, simple drawings and symbols, along with accompanying text and music. What makes it direct is how it attracts the viewer. When I said we need to partner with the audience, this does it brilliantly. A newbie watching this video gets the real sense that the creators are on their side. Viewers are not likely to feel they're being sold a bill of goods or being yelled at or accused of being evil. The video appeals to the true self in all of us. A wonderful job, A+. Now, the myth of authority is covered, again, without calling it that. You'll find it at about 4 minutes in. Again, it serves it up in plain terms, easily digestible, and with very little risk of offending people since it appeals to that true self. I have to say that the direct appeal to the true self is its shining virtue. As far as the myth is concerned, we don't see that prioritized in the way that I've been suggesting. It's certainly pointed out, but it's not presented as the big picture root cause type of concept. Instead, a newbie can come away seeing that as simply another part of the whole. This is the sort of thing I want to alert you to when you evaluate all the various messaging out there. Train yourself to notice whether the myth is mentioned at all, and if it is, how it fits in. Our North Star needs to be putting the myth front and center. So using this video as an example, I'd have liked to see it somehow tying together all the great points it makes about statism with the myth of authority as a foundational root. This increases the chance the viewer absorbs the myth's core importance. Okay, I'm going to wrap it up for today. These examples were great illustrations of using the direct strategy. We'll return to that subject next time and dive deeper into how we train ourselves to do it, all with the purpose of slamming head-on into the myth of authority and doing it exactly where it counts, in the person's mind. But that does it for today's installment. Take care and see you next time. Many thanks to Substack for hosting my podcast and my articles. And thanks especially to you for listening. And remember, keep looking for those white pills.